안녕하십니까, 여러분. Welcome back to the MatchNet podcast. It's your boy, Benjy. I have a topic for you that will be very, very, hopefully, I hope, insightful for people that are really struggling with overwhelm and stress, especially regarding the matching process, preparing for the blessing and your future, all right? And this is a kind of framework and concept that I'm hoping will allow you to have a lot of more peace of mind and less stress and overwhelm in your life. And I think the reason, if you are feeling rather stressed in life, is because your priorities are not aligned with in the order that you want them to be. Now, let me make this clear for you. I'll ask you right now, what are your number one and number two priorities? Go ahead, speak them out loud, speak them into the universe. What are your number one and number two priorities? Now, most people that I ask that question will say something along the lines of my family, relationships, connection, preparing for the blessing, investing in myself, working on my own personal growth, love, God, my faith, that sort of thing is number one to me. But then I ask you, how much of your time and attention and your focus is really dedicated towards that number one priority? Because if you think about it through a certain lens, our priorities in life are not so much dictated by what we would like our priorities to be, but rather where we spend our attention and our resources, our time and our money. Our priorities are actually more closely dictated by where we spend our resources, all right? And that includes time, attention, and money, and focus and energy and all that stuff. So if you look at your day, not just your schedule, but look at the empty headspace at the time when you're going to bed, when you wake up in the morning, what are you thinking about when you have time, when you're just driving to work or to school? What are you listening to? What is consuming your attention and your headspace, your mental real estate, your heart real estate? Because that is actually what your number one focus is right now in your life. Now, so the reason this exercise is important, because if you can list your number one and number two priorities in your life, let's say, for example, it's number one, preparing myself to be an exceptional husband or wife for my spouse, future spouse. And number two, it is my career. For example, let's say, working on my career, having stability in my life. If you are spending your headspace and your real estate and your time, your extra time at the end of the day, when you wake up in the morning, consumed by thoughts of how do I make more money, getting stressed about things at work, and you're constantly thinking about this, and the things that you consume on YouTube or through podcasts or through audiobooks or reading are not aligned with really what you want to be your number one priority, it means that your focus is switched such that when your secondary priority comes in the way of your true priority, it becomes stressful. Let me give you an example of this. For me, just to be real talk here, for many years in my life, I would have said my number one priority is my family, my children, raising godly children and having a blessed family. That's what I have always said. But the reality is that if you looked at my schedule, if you looked into my head, most of my headspace was consumed by thoughts of my mission, creating changguk, creating an environment, making a difference, making an impact, having influence. How do I teach better, right? Which is fine and noble, whatever. But the problem was that I was saying my number one priority was my family, but it was not reflected in the actual attention that I was giving to certain areas of my life. And so the result was that anytime my family, especially my kids, got in the way of my mission, which is a secondary priority to me, it was flipped. And I started getting frustrated, upset, stressed, because the thing that I was consumed by was being interrupted by the thing that actually matters most to me. And so when I realized this, only in recent years, I realized this, my priorities were flipped and I didn't even know it, because your priorities are actually dictated not by what you want your priorities to be, but where you focus your attention. That is really what matters to you. And if you look at most people's phone stats on their phone, look at the time they spend on certain apps, the reality is that most people's primary focus in life is enjoyment, entertainment, status, looking good, my mission, me. Me. Is that who you want to be? And if that's the case, it's okay. You're still loved. God loves you eternally. And it's possible to shift this, as I have. Fortunately, God showed me the hard way that my priorities were shift because I was stressed out. I was just frustrated at my kids and my family. And I was confused because why is it that I'm frustrated when things are interrupting the most important thing for me? And it was because my priorities were off. And so what I did, my friends, I decided I'm going to switch this. I'm going to focus 100%. Number one priority, raising wise children, raising a blessed family, raising a godly environment. That's my number one priority right now. And how did I do that? You start spending more time and focus and attention and headspace in that environment. I started talking more with people about raising children. I started reading books, for goodness sake, about raising children. I started listening to podcasts about raising children. And I stopped consuming the stuff that was leading me down this road of how do I make an impact more and have influence and change the world, and which is all fine and noble, and I believe a God-given bestowment and instillment in my heart that I have had since I was a young boy, this desire to create Chanoga. As we all do, we all have a mission. But what happens when you switch the priority, which most people do, priority number one for most people becomes career-oriented, making a difference, impact, my status in my mission or in my career, my university. But what happens when you put to the wayside, falls to the wayside, is the actual number one, which should be family, creating a blessed family, and going into the direction of that. Whether that means right now focusing on your faith, your relationship with God, whether that means right now starting a matching process, going full force, 100%, investing in that. But you do not let your number one focus be career, anything like that. When I talk with matching candidates and I ask them, what is your number one focus and priority in your life? If they say anything to do with career, making money, you gotta shift. You gotta change, brother. You have to change, sister. And it's okay to be number two or number three as career as your focus, but it should never be number one because that stuff doesn't matter nearly as much. Yes, it matters. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter nearly as much as your number one should be. What is your number one? And focus on that. Lots of love to you guys. I just came to pick up my son. Have a great day. You are loved more than you know. God bless.